Love this podcast? Support this show through the Acast supporter feature. It's up to you how much you give, and there's no regular commitment. Just click the link in the show description to support now.
You're locked in.
Look at what we have here, folks.
To the only show that matters.
The cream of the crop.
Duke Loves Rasslin.
And there is no one that does it better than
your host,
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass.
the Duke.
And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Hi, this is Earl Oliver from Sully's Vintage Wrestling.
This is Raj Giri with WrestlingInc.com.
This is Sean Reed, boxing writer and undercover low-key wrestling fan, and you're listening to Duke Loves Rasslin. Woo!
Welcome back to the Duke Loves Rasslin Podcast, the show about pro wrestling and everything else. And I got to tell you, folks, I really want to thank you. Last week was such a major episode. Once again, it was the 4-year anniversary of the Duke Loves Rasslin Podcast. And you folks really showed up, had a great time. There was a lot of folks on the live stream, which was just so fun to see. So thank you once again. And I got to tell you, I've really been reflecting as we've come up on this 4-year anniversary and all the great guests that have been on the show and how important they've all been for the evolution of this podcast. You know, because again, this is all about telling stories of my heroes, you know, people from yesterday, from today, and even people who are going to be stars tomorrow, helping them tell their stories. It really isn't about me. It's about them and what they can share with the world, because there is just some great tips and examples that can be used and, you know, really endure, as far as I'm concerned, forever. When I think about some of my favorite guests and guests that you listeners have continuously talked about, there's somebody in particular who, you know, they've only been on the show once, but their impact was felt so much that it's like, you know what, I got to get this guy back. Got to get him back. And it's none other than Scoot Andrews. I mean, legitimately somebody that to this day, you listeners ask me about. How's Scoot doing? Can you get Scoot back on the show? What a great guy. What a nice guy. Oh, my God. And a lot of you have gone back and you've taken a look at some of Scoot's old matches and what have you, just to, if you weren't as familiar with him when you first heard him on the show, you certainly are now. And I want to thank you for that. Keep doing that. Keep sharing Scoot Andrews matches and what have you, because this brother was just ahead of his time. And it's crazy to me, because if he would have debuted within the past 5 years, he'd be on the top of the business. And I truly believe that. I truly feel that in my heart of hearts. And all you have to do is watch any of his matches, especially his stuff, you know, Ring of Honor or even the ECWA, any of that stuff, his stuff down in Florida, any Scoot Andrews stuff that you can find, folks. You watch what he was able to do out there, and you can see that this is a guy that really could have been a major star in the business if he would have started closer to today as opposed to when he did, back when it was a big man territory and all that nonsense there. So, you know, I'd be remiss. Without further ado, welcome back to the Duke Loves Rasslin Podcast, the Black Nature Boy, Scoot Andrews.
Duke, what's going on, my man? Great intro. Thanks for the kind words. I can't believe it's been 4 years since I've been on the show. I swear it feels like it was only like a year ago. But glad to be back and looking forward to doing this thing with you, man.
Well, seriously, Scoot, I got to tell you, man, and I'm going to start off with a question here. I want to know why. Why are you such a good dude? And I know that's kind of a strange thing to hear, but legitimately one of the biggest takeaways that folks get when they go back and they listen to that episode is just the fact that you were such a good person. Where does that come from? And how are you able to afford to continue to be the way that you are?
Well, that's a tough question to answer, man. I would have to say it goes back to my childhood, raised by a single mom. I don't know if you have or anyone else that has in their childhood, but you've heard the stories of single black moms and how strict they were. She was definitely that. She was a man and a woman. and she can still take me out today. As a matter of fact, I think I'm still scared to even say a cuss word in front of my mom. And I'm 53 years old. So that was the beginning of it. And then, just playing team sports, having great coaching, having coaches that, no matter how good you were, how well you played, always kept you humble. So I was very blessed to have good coaches all the way through, youth football, high school, and even in college. And you know what, man, I'm just one of those people that likes to please other people. We use this thing at my company called HBDI, where it kind of measures you and your personality and how you react and what your tendencies are. And there's 4 quadrants, and mine leans heavily into the people quadrant. So that means that I have a lot of empathy. I care what people think. I care about other people. I put other people before myself. And when I get stressed, I actually go outside of the graph with my caring for other people. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but I just think it's in my nature. It's the way I'm wired. And I just like pleasing others and being around people and making other people happy.
It's funny that you say that, Scoot, and it explains so much why you and I connect so well, because, I definitely am from a single-parent household as well. And my mom, first of all, she's a law enforcement officer, so you already know she doesn't play around. But she also has the Caribbean thing. She's originally from Jamaica. So when you talk about not messing around, by all means, brother, I know exactly what you're talking about. And to this day, at 37 years old, I will not cuss in front of my mom. That is a strict no-no. So I'm with you. Kindred spirits in that regard there. And that's interesting. That's interesting that you're a people pleaser. And it's no wonder why pro wrestling was something that you excelled in so effectively. And even, in business, in the line of work that you do now, why you're so successful. You not only do you want to please people, in order to do that, you have to take the time to care enough to understand people.
This is true. That is very, very true. And then if you take that to the wrestling business, I think Gabe Sapolsky, that was with Ring of Honor at the time, now he's with Evolve, was quoted as saying that, I was an ideal locker room guy. And I take pride in that. Some people look at that as a slight. They look at it as, I don't have much talent. So, all he sees me as is the guy that's great in the locker room. But working with Hack Myers, who kind of took me under his wing as I was starting to come up in Florida, and having great promoters and just understanding that, your place in the locker room is, one, to sit down and shut up when you're young and take everything in, and make sure that you say hello to everybody in the locker room when you walk in. And that's managers, that's referees, that's valets, that's workers, that's everybody in the room. And then as you become that veteran, you can't get away from that. Some of the guys that you hear about being jerks in the locker room, or, they were good when they were younger, but as they got better in the business, they started to treat the younger people not the way they were treated. And that's not cool. So, especially like at Ring of Honor, ECWA, I was coming in for, one shot here, one shot there. But, I was genuinely interested in meeting everybody in the locker room, for one, because the talent level in those 2 locker rooms was through the roof. So, I just wanted to fit in, be one of the guys, and just not be that guy in the locker room that everybody goes, oh, here comes that jerk again. So it was kind of a huge honor to hear Gabe use those words in regards to me. And that means, that people look at me in a light that, I could trust that guy. That guy's always going to have a positive attitude. He's going to give you good advice. He's going to, pay attention to your matching and give you pointers if you ask for it. He's going to ask you for pointers. I just want to be that guy that blended in with everybody.
You were there during the heyday of ECWA when they had, literally the greatest wrestling tournament in the world, the Super 8. And also you're one of the original Ring of Honor guys. You were on the first show and you were at other shows and what have you, and you did your thing. I mean, legitimately, you are a guy that has been around. You've been there and done that a few times over. You brought up Evolve. Does it trip you out to see some of these kids who, were 2 or 3 years old, maybe not even born, who are now these pro wrestlers and they're coming through a territory like Evolve, literally a feeder for WWE's NXT system? does it trip you out to see these kids? I mean, these are full-grown adults now, man, and you know, they were literally a gleam in their parents' eye, or a baby who still needed to be nursed when you were kicking butt in the original Ring of Honor.
Man, let me tell you something. I'm going to put it in perspective. 2 years ago, I did a reunion show for IPW down here in Florida, and I was in a title match with Austin Theory. Now, if you're watching NXT, and now I guess he's on Raw now, you know who all day Austin Theory is. So, you know, Ron Nemi, promoter for IPW. So listen, we're going to do this. He pitched the whole thing to me. We're going to do this show. We're going to have some of the old guys come back, and you're going to work. It's going to be the old guys versus the up and coming generation, which sounds great in theory. So Darby Allin was on the show, Austin Theory, the Precipice, I think is what their name is. The tag team was Skinny Vinny as their manager. All these guys are with Evolve, and now obviously Austin has moved up and Darby's on AEW. But, you know, I walk into the dressing room and Austin's there, and we introduce ourselves, and I'm just looking at this guy. He's 20 years old. I'm 51. So literally he wasn't even born when I started wrestling. And now I'm going to work this guy for 15, 20 minutes in the ring, one-on-one. And granted, I was one of the few older guys that did a singles match, let alone with the 20-year-old kid who could absolutely go. And let me tell you something, it does not surprise me that kid is on Raw already. His mind for the business, his psychology, he's a total package. He's what they call a prodigy. When you look at, you know, musicians who can just walk up to a piano and start playing, that's Austin Theory. That kid was unbelievable. Probably one of my favorite matches in my entire career, and it happened, 2 years ago? Good stuff. So, yeah, it does kind of trip me out. It kind of bums you out a little bit, too, though, if you're a guy my age who, you know, was up and down the road in Florida all the way to Delaware, out to California, and you just had to be lucky enough to be seen by someone, which I was, but it would have been a heck of a lot easier if there had been a feeder territory back then that you could learn the business, learn the psychology, do shows in front of hot crowds, and then have WWE's eyes on you the entire time you're doing it. So that would have been ideal for some of us back in the day. But you know what? It wasn't. I'm not bitter about it. You know, some of these old guys are bitter they didn't get the chances they got. These kids are getting now. But, you know, watching Evolve and then watching people like Austin take off is huge, man. It was so much fun to work with that kid, and I think the sky's the limit for him.
For sure. And shout out to Austin Theory. Definitely. You know, I give him a hard time online as often as I can out of respect, because legitimately this kid is just everyone I've spoken to, you know, now Rudy Boy Gonzalez, who's a mutual friend of ours, literally the trainer of champions. He puts over Austin as well as just being a kid who that's a hot ticket right there, man. That's a big prospect. And, you know, speaking of Rudy, when I had you on the show 4 years ago, we were talking about Daniel Bryan in a very similar light. I mean, when Ring of Honor started, that was his first major show, and you were already a veteran in the business at that point. So when you really think about the fact that 20 years ago you were a veteran in the business, here you are today and you're a veteran in the business, and we're talking about these young guys and how much promise and talent they have and what have you. It blows my mind to hear you talk about Austin in a very similar way that you talked about Daniel Bryan.
Very similar. Very similar. The only thing that Daniel didn't have was the size that Austin has. But, yeah, they're very, very similar as far as their mentality and just unbelievable talents inside the ring.
You know, Scoot, you're a guy who you went through it all. I mean, you're a big name on the indies, and, you know, you worked WWE over and over and over again. You were a dependable person that they could plug in anytime they were in your neck of the woods. And we talked about that at length the last time you were on the show. Ultimately, you got to a point where you realized that pro wrestling couldn't be your main thing in life anymore, and that you really, outside of your family, you had to find something else that was going to keep food on the table. And there was a point where you had to make that transition where you weren't Scoot Andrews, the wrestler, primarily, that was a secondary deal. You had to be Andrew. Talk to me about that, Scoot, because we're living in a time where we have a global pandemic that has completely taken the wrestling industry in particular and turned it upside down. I mean, most promotions are not running right now, which means most wrestlers are not wrestling right now. Talk to me about that transition, man, when you have to go from being a pro wrestler primarily to just being a regular guy. How did that feel? And do you have any advice for folks who may be faced with that issue right now?
Early on in my career, when I was doing primarily Florida, I had a job. I was in sales, and sales is typically like the easiest gig you could have that would allow you to be able to do wrestling. Because your schedule is a little bit more flexible and, you can be out doing whatever you need to be doing. So I was always able to do that while I was working. And then as I started to, kind of realize I'm probably never going to get signed by the WWE or WWF back then and then became WWE, they used me numerous times, but, never ever got to the point where they were talking about contracts or anything like that. I think maybe even Kevin Kelly had even told me that they wanted me to go to Japan or do something to make more of a name for myself before I came on. Basically, they were just telling me I was too small. But I kind of realized, that's probably not where it's going to happen. And I'll give you an example. I knew for a fact it wasn't going to happen when Christopher Daniels and I tagged against Kai and Tai, which was Taka and I forgot the other guy's name. Oh, Lord,
it could have been Funaki.
Yeah, it was Funaki.
Okay.
Funaki. And we had an awesome tag match. Just out on YouTube if you want to look for it. But when we got done, we came back to the back, and Arn Anderson met us at the curtain. And Arn is the agent for all tag matches, or was before he moved over to AEW. And we come back through Gorilla, and normally, as enhancement. You just walk through Gorilla, they go get match, and you head back, get dressed, and go stand in front of the monitor to be seen. But as we came back through the curtain, Arn greeted all four of us and was like, "That's what you call a tag team match." That was a joy to watch. You guys were unbelievable. Great psychology. I love this. I love that. I love the go home. I love everything you guys did. That was freaking amazing. So as Chris Daniels and I are walking to the locker room to get dressed, we're looking at each other like, holy crap, I think we might have just got a job, brother. Then the next day we drove to Orlando and worked each other in a dart match, and nothing ever happened. So, I kind of, as you're waiting for that call, it never came. And I kind of realized, what, this may not be the ticket that's going to pay for my future. So, again, stay very dedicated to the business, never missed a booking, never missed training, never missed really anything. But I kind of started to try to figure out what I might want to do the rest of my life. Long story short, I kind of morphed wrestling into my corporate life and kind of jumped headlong into being a corporate or sales trainer. Not having any sales training background, never even really had a public speaking class other than, standing in front of people in your tights with a mic in your hand, and kind of morphed the personality of Scoot Andrews into myself. And it's funny because every time I would go in front of a training class or stand up to give a speech or to give a talk, I would my voice would completely change and I'd go right into Scoot Andrews and, got over my fear of stand in front of people I didn't know. Obviously, in a wrestling ring, you're separated by the ring, the barriers, and all you really see is, a blur. But when you're standing in front of 15 salespeople and you have to teach them how to do something specific, you got to really be tuned into what's going on. So I actually used the wrestling background as a way to morph into something that I could use in corporate America. So got very lucky in that I had a manager who was a huge wrestling fan. When I say huge wrestling fan, I think he was like a personal assistant to some guy back in the championship wrestling from Florida in the 70s. And he would literally let me book training classes wherever Monday Night Raw was that they had an opening. So I could literally go, hey, Raw's going to be in Chicago next Monday. Let's do a spin. Can I do a spin selling class for the Chicago office? And he was like, book it. It was money. So I was able to use, probably not a good thing to say out loud. The company's not in business anymore, but I was able to use company travel to get to Chicago, do the show, do SmackDown on Tuesday, and then do a training class on Wednesday and Thursday and fly home on Friday to be ready for my independent shots on the weekend. So that worked out really well. That's why you will see me on so many different WWE matches and different venues and so many different people I worked, because at first it was just Florida, but then it became whenever, I would call up Dr. Tom and see if they had anything available. And whenever he'd tell me places they had spots, and then I would go back to my boss and book a training class around it. So all that being said, got married, had 2 kids, which I think we talked about my kids on the last shot we did. And, it got to a point where I had a 2-year-old and one on the way, and a wife going, you don't really need to be gone so much with work and on the weekends. So that's kind of when I made a decision to, hang them up. We never really hang them up permanently, but that's kind of when I hung them up. And then I just took that corporate training thing and took it as far as I could, got it in with a great company that I'm with now for 13 years. And that went with having the sales background prior and then the training background. And then I just became a great candidate for management. And now I'm a director of the company I'm with now. So the advice I would give, as you asked me at the beginning of this very long answer, was the advice I would give is have something to fall back on. I mean, it's great to put all your eggs in the wrestling basket and give it everything you got. Similar to, I saw the thing about Austin Theory on The Wrestlers or whatever, which is on Vice, where, he pretty much dedicated everything he has to wrestling, and that's great. He got there. But for every Austin Theory, there's 100 guys that aren't. So always have something that you can fall back on. Don't let wrestling be your primary way of earning a living. It could be a big chunk of it, but if it's the only thing you're doing to make money, you're an ACL tear away from being broke. So find something that you can dabble in. I know I'll bring up another person, Chad Collier. I don't know if you remember him. He was in Super 8 with us. He went into comedy. Now he's doing magic shows. It's not corporate America, but guess what? It's something else. And he's doing very well with it. He's been all over the world doing his magic shows, and he had something to fall back on. You got to have something else. And I know you heard that. Everybody hears that when they're playing any kind of sport. If you're never going to go pro, you got to have something to fall back on. You just got to have something else. If you got that something else, and when it all comes to an end and you can just turn and shift all that passion into what you were doing, then you're going to be in a very, very, very good place. And that's where I am right now.
That's a great point. Once again, folks, we're talking to the Black Nature Boy, Scoot Andrews here. He's dropping some gems here. And you don't have to look far to see examples of exactly what you're talking about. Veterans who were before your time, like Dusty Wolf, this guy is and I think I told you this before, he's an adjunct professor, and that's been the way he's kept food on the table at his household. But even stars of today, folks like Becky Lynch and John Cena and Batista, these folks are doing acting, and they're making themselves available for commercials and all these other things. Like you said, don't put all your eggs in one basket, because it's one injury, an ACL, a neck, or whatever. It's one injury. That's all it takes to take this dream away from you. And then what? Starting from the bottom is not easy, especially when you have no choice but to do so. And that's a challenge that you see so many places. It's like, where do you even begin when you're forced to retire from the main thing that you've been doing and that you put so much into? So that's great advice there, Scoot. And I like what you said there about the fact that you performed in so many different venues all over the country, because I wondered about that. And I should have asked you about that the last time you were on the show. You absolutely were in all the major cities, and it never registered to me. In fact, it confused me when you told me that they never gave you a contract, because it's like, well, Scoot, you were everywhere, though. So now it makes sense that you were utilizing the benefits from the other job and combining the opportunities in order to get to all these different places. I mean, that's sharp, brother. That's hustling right there.
Yeah, man. And, again, 90% of good things that happen to you in life or when is luck and opportunity coming together. And, I was very lucky to have a supervisor who was such a huge wrestling fan that, he was more pumped for me going to Chicago, more pumped for me going to LA to do Raw than he was for me to actually be doing my real job, which was really, really cool. And to be honest with you, I don't even think I would have even gotten the training gig if that guy had not been such a huge wrestling fan. It's crazy how wrestling was the reason I ended up becoming a trainer, because I bombed the interview as far as like presenting, because I didn't know what I was doing, for one. But he took a flyer on me because he kind of understood what it took to do what we do in wrestling. And he knew those skills would be transferable. So, again, being very, very lucky, and it worked out well. Yeah, man, I was in L.A. I did Staples Center. I did the Pond in Anaheim, Chicago, St. Louis. Never did the Garden. My boy Mike Sullivan, my tag team partner here at IPW for a few years, also known as Freedom Rider with IPW, was from New York. So he got the Madison Square Garden shot over me because they wanted to hook him up in his hometown. I was good with that. So that's the only major venue I did not work in. And I'm bummed about it, but not because my boy got to do it.
It's cool that he was able to do that since he was a hometown boy, so to speak. That's good stuff.
Oh,
and it's funny because you mentioned the Garden, Madison Square Garden, New York. Literally, it will forever be the home of the WWE. Doesn't matter if they ever perform there again, that will always be known as WWE territory right there. All those fans screaming at the top of their lungs to seeing pro wrestling, people in the ring settling differences right there. I mean, it gets no better than that.
And I was going to say, man, and it's the one arena where the entrance was on the side of the ring. If you remember as a child, obviously they don't use that entrance anymore, but it was always cool to watch the wrestlers just as they had the hard camera focused on the ring. You could just see them coming through that door and walking down that little short tunnel right down the middle of the arena into the ring. It was super cool. Never got to do it though.
Yeah, but that's a great description, and absolutely coming in from the side of the ring as opposed to what we're used to there. Dealing with this global pandemic that has shut down literally everything, including all different types of entertainment, music events and plays and sports and pro wrestling. I mean, literally. Did you ever imagine in your wildest dreams that you would live to see a day where pro wrestling would be presented on a consistent basis without fans?
Man, that's a very interesting question. A good friend of mine and I were talking about that the other day. I mean, you talk about, would you ever imagine it in your lifetime? Hell, I wouldn't have imagined it 4 months ago. I never would have imagined they would have canceled. I say cancel WrestleMania, but canceled the actual show in the Tampa Stadium, and made it a 2-night with no fans. I mean, it is such an unprecedented time right now, man. It's scary. And I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Contagion, but if you haven't, take a look at that movie, because it basically is everything that is happening to us right now in that movie. It's almost scary how similar it is to what we're going through. But then, you look at where we are right now and your question about the pandemic and the wrestling business. I mean, I couldn't even imagine being a wrestler who's obviously not with one of the big companies doing independent shows. First of all, your gym or your ring where you train is closed. No shows. No gyms are open. If you live in an apartment, you don't have access to any weights or gyms or anything. I mean, how do you even, as a professional worker, stay in shape, let alone, keep your skills sharp? And then once this lifts a little bit and they get to start, I heard there's a couple of states that are doing some shows this coming weekend, but I can't imagine everybody walking into that ring that night is not going to blow up on the first freaking spot they do. because they haven't been able to do any wrestling. And for those of you guys who've never, been a wrestler, there's no cardio you can do on the planet that can prepare you for what you're going to do in the ring other than going to a ring and getting it in. It's going to be sloppy. I wouldn't even want to see the first couple of shows. It's got to be sloppy, right?
Absolutely, because it's been so long that you kind of have to work out the ring rust, so to speak. You got to get the kinks out. And especially since you don't have that crowd to play off of, goodness, just stand in an empty room and try to have a conversation with somebody. You will get so self-conscious real quick when you hear the echo, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, I was telling a good friend of mine, we're having drinks the other night and had a couple cigars, and we're 6 feet apart. But we were talking, and he's a huge wrestling fan. He's 3 doors down from me. He was trying to talk me into going to Mania, and I was like, listen, dude, I'm not going to pay to go to a wrestling show. But I'll watch it with you at your house. But we were just talking about how just watching Raw right now, I try to keep up with AJ and Daniel Bryan and Samoa Joe, all my friends. And it's, to me, being a former wrestler, it's unwatchable because you can hear everything. I was joking about Otis when he was doing his spot with Mandy and whatever, when he won the Money in the Bank. Like, in between everything he did, he was saying, oh, yeah, in between everything, which I'm pretty sure he's done his whole career, but you can't really hear it in an arena full of people. But it just jumps out at you so loudly when you watch him work in a quiet, no-noise arena. And it's got to be distracting. I can't even imagine what it would be like to even try to do a match. Now, obviously, you train in front of nobody, and that's awkward. But as a heel, which I was a lot of my career, and feeding off the crowd and working the crowd and finding that one person in the front row that you can jaw back and forth with, no matter, if the match started to get a little slower, a little lull in the match, if you wanted to get the crowd back into it, and that person not being there, that would be extremely hard.
You look at a guy like Otis, where he's the Money in the Bank winner, this comedy act that he has going on. And, he has a wrestling background. He wrestled in high school. He may have done it in college as well. He's a big guy as well, a strong guy. But this comedy act is the thing that's getting over. And it just seems like they're having to find a way to do something other than the traditional get it done in the ring, just to entertain folks. And because it has to translate more like a television show as opposed to a sports exhibition, which, you and I are guys that love the NWA territories because it was real wrestling. That was the stuff that we grew up on. And I know that's a lot of the stuff that you patent your style of wrestling and even the way that you delivered your promos. Folks like Ric Flair and, of course, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, you being a Florida guy, you talked about these guys being such major influences on your career. So it's interesting to see the shift where they're really going back to this more entertainment-focused product, because how many people can really sit there and watch just a regular wrestling match without any kind of crowd response for hours at a time?
I can't. It's almost unwatchable for me. Again, being a former wrestler and just understanding what it takes to get the crowd in the palm of your hand. And one of the things that I learned early on was, when you go for a pin towards the end of the match, and if the crowd is not counting 1, 2, 3 during that count, then you don't really have them in your hand, right? But, the best matches you've ever seen, the whole crowd counts in unison. 1, 2, and then that 3 hits, and then everybody loses their mind. Now that's not there. It's not there at all. So, the crowd is a great way for you to judge how your match is going, and you can adjust on the fly. But with no crowd, there's no adjusting on the fly. And then, how do you really adjust on the fly when they can hear everything you're saying? So it's got to be brutally hard for you to even communicate with your opponent in the ring. Even if you blow a spot, how do you recover from that without saying it loud enough for everybody to hear it? That's got to be incredibly hard.
And what else is incredibly hard? And I really want to get your perspective on this because, again, you're a guy that even before you became a wrestler, just growing up, you know, you loved that NWA product and that championship wrestling from Florida and seeing guys like Dusty Rhodes. His son, Cody, is not only a pro wrestler today, but he's also a executive. He's an executive vice president of All Elite Wrestling. And he's one of the main architects that have put together the number 2 pro wrestling promotion in the world right now. What are your thoughts on that? Just to see a second-generation wrestler go from being just a kid who's trying to figure it out in the ring to now being somebody who legitimately is responsible for people having jobs in the industry. You know, he's helping run an entire promotion and a successful promotion. What are your thoughts seeing something like that, Scoot?
You know, first of all, the fact that Dusty's kid is in charge of an entire company completely blows my mind, but it doesn't really, because if you hear of any of the older guys talk about, you know, the championship wrestling from Florida, even the old Mid-Atlantic and the Crockett days, just Dusty's mind for creating angles and the way, you know, he created stars and elevated stars and made stars out of everybody he touched. It doesn't surprise me that apple fell right on top of that tree because, you know, Dusty was way ahead of his time, as a lot of people like to put it. And the fact his kid was always around that, it does not surprise me that he's taken this thing and run with it. And then my tie to the whole thing is, you know, a lot of people know this about me, and I'm not sure if you've seen my Twitter, you know I'm a huge Jacksonville Jaguar fan. So the fact that the Jags owner owns the wrestling company makes it even better. I think I probably could have got a job there if I was still doing this, just from my sheer fact that I'm such a huge Jags fan. But yeah, man, I think it's a great thing. I mean, he's just like his dad. Hell, he even sounds like his dad a little bit if you close your eyes and listen. And it's just a testament to the fact that he sat, he paid attention, he watched, he learned from his dad. Some people can have a parent who does great things and they want to just cut their own path and not listen to what their parents have to tell them. And then they always circle back and go, if I had just listened to my dad or if I had just listened to my mom. I'm pretty sure Cody listened to his dad a lot and is taking a lot of what his dad gave him and is running with it right now. And a lot of people will argue it's a much more watchable product than what's coming out of New York right now. So I'm in the middle. I like both, but they're not going anywhere anytime soon. And that's a very good thing for a lot of people.
Let us know, Scoot. If anyone wants to check in with the Black Nature Boy, Scoot Andrews, and hear your thoughts, you know, you chime in about pro wrestling. You definitely talk about football, and hopefully we get something. We get some kind of football coming up this year. It'd be interesting to see. Let everybody know. How can they follow you online there, Scoot?
Well, the best place to follow me is on Twitter. Hopefully the president doesn't shut it down, but which is hilarious to me. But my handle on Twitter is the BNB Scoot Andrews. Pretty easy. BNB for Black Nature Boy Scoot Andrews, and you will find me there. Friend me, follow me, I'll follow you back, and pretty simple.
Scoot, before I let you go, first of all, I want to give you a formal invitation because, listen, I can't wait another 4 years to have you back on the show. So let's give it some time and see, you know, later on this summer where we are in the pro wrestling and also the NFL world. Can I get you to come back not only on the show, but I'd like you to come back and do a live video episode of the Duke Loves Rasslin Podcast. Can we put that together and have you come and do that?
And you tell me the date and the time. I'll be there.
I love it.
Yes, sir.
So we'll definitely book that. But before I let you go, I know that you love your family. You know, the last time you were on the show, you talked about your wife and the kids and what have you, which is just awesome. That's one of the reasons why I really respect you so much as well. You're definitely a family man. Tell me, out of everybody in the house, who is most likely to be the pro wrestler? Okay, you probably never been asked that question before, so I will put you on the spot now. I'm not saying that they're going to do it, but if anyone were to come to you and say, Dad, I'm going to follow in one of your footsteps at least, I'm going to be a wrestler, who would it be and why?
I'm going to say my youngest, Ashton. the soccer player, track athlete. One, because she has got the personality to pull it off. She can walk into a room and light it up. She's freaking hilarious. It's to the point. She's very much like me in that she tries to make everybody laugh a lot. Sometimes it falls flat. Sometimes it doesn't. But, she can definitely take over a room. She also has the athletic ability to pull it off. Now, I'm going to take it a step further and say she's 1A. 1B would be my oldest daughter, and I think they would make a hell of a tag team because my youngest daughter would be the fast, high-flying mouthpiece, but my oldest daughter, who does competitive cheer, and she's probably arguably the number one senior-level cheer team in America, in the world, actually. They got screwed out of winning the world championship because Worlds got canceled. But she is kind of built like a linebacker. And not she's not fat by any means, but she's just solid. Her legs are big as mine. And she can pick – I'm still 200 pounds. She can come up and grab me around the race and pick me up off the ground. So she could be the muscle of the tag team. And then my youngest would be the mouthpiece and the high flyer. So I think they could make a hell of a tag team. They're not going anywhere near a wrestling ring, just so you know. But they would make a hell of a tag team.
Scoot Andrews, the Black Nature Boy. You're a corporate trainer, pro wrestler, husband, and girl dad. As always, brother, really appreciate you coming on the show.
Oh, man, anytime. I really appreciate you wanting me back on. It's hard sometimes for us old guys, and we worry about people forgetting who we are. But, anytime you want me on, man, just give me a shout, and we'll make it happen.
It is always a pleasure to speak with Scoot Andrews. I mean, like I said, just a really classy guy, good person. There's something about speaking to good people. It really feeds the soul because we need that, right? We need to bounce ideas and share information with people who actually, you just know that they actually care about other people. And you know that they have something to offer. I'm of the belief that we all have something to offer. Some bad, but most of us, a lot of good. And when you have somebody like Scoot Andrews who you can communicate with, it's just, boy, I'll tell you, man, I could talk to that dude forever, And I was happy that he chose to come back to the show. That was 4 years in the making, man. He's one of my original guests. So, really cool. Thank you again, Scoot. That's my guy. Folks, it's been a crazy week in pro wrestling, and it's going to go down in history just because of how all over the place it's been. Of course, we had the tragic passing of Shad Gaspard. He was one half of Crime Time in the WWE. This guy's a husband. He's a father, somebody's son. Had that tragic accident where he was swimming with his son, and the water started getting a little rough. They needed help. Lifeguards jumped in to help out, and Shad said, "No, don't grab me. Grab my kid." So they saved the son, and unfortunately, Shad was taken away, and then they found him days later. Just tragic. In his final moments, he was saving someone else's life. And when you listen to people talk about Shad and the things they say about him, you can't find a bad word about the guy. Just a class personified individual, no different from Scoot Andrews, just a good guy. You could tell Shad is really a good guy, right? So it's a big loss. We had another loss that we had to deal with under different circumstances, but no less tragic. Hannah Kamara. This is somebody who, in my opinion, was going to be the next big thing in pro wrestling. Talented. Supremely creative. Beautiful. She passed away at the hands of suicide, and the culprit was cyberbullying. She's on a show on Netflix, Terrace House, and I guess people who watched the show, they took issue with something that she did on the show, and they inundated her with just horrible messages. And at least one person told her to go kill herself, and she sure went ahead and did it. And it breaks my heart, man, because legitimately I've been watching Hannah for the last few years. I mean, and just loving everything that she does. I mean, and she's reinvented herself a few times, and it's just been tremendous. You know, and Caitlin, who's been on the show, and she's part of Duke's Rasslin crew. Caitlin has some great photos of meeting Hannah at meet and greets when Hannah's done some tours here in America, and just beautiful photos. It's like, man, this is somebody who's going to be a big star. I believe Hannah Kamara could have been as big a name in pro wrestling as anyone today. I think she would have had that type of appeal. And she's young too, man. So she had time. If she would have made it to the WWE, can you imagine what they could have done with her? She could work. Outfits and colorfulness is just, it translates so well. I mean, just, it could have been amazing. And unfortunately, we're never going to know because her life is cut short at the hands of cyberbullying. Now, I got to tell you, folks, and this is, and we're going to end the show with this segment here. There's a lot of people out there who make it their business to just say the most vile, negative things to others online, and they make it like this is a game for them. This is what they do. And it's just, it needs to stop. And I know some of you out there, oh, freedom of speech, I can say whatever I want, or I'm just telling a joke. It's not a joke. It's not a joke. Especially if you're the only one laughing. There was a guy, and I'm not going to mention his name. There's a guy who has some kind of show, some kind of podcast, and he made some very disparaging remarks about Alexa Bliss recently, where he was, talking trash about her ability to wrestle, which is fine. You don't like the way that she wrestles, that's fine. There's a lot of people who I don't particularly like the way that they do things either. And if you're going to critique somebody's style or what they do, that's fine. I got no issues with that. But he said some things about her that was just ridiculous. About her and it was a sexual comment in nature as well. It was just completely over the top, completely unacceptable. And a lot of folks let him know about it. Wrestlers and podcasters and fans and everybody, a lot of people let him know that they were not happy with what he said. And this isn't a new thing for him. This guy's been saying crazy stuff for a long time. So he doubled down and tripled down and said, hey, I say whatever I want, it's a joke and you don't like it, whatever. All this nonsense, right? Because the guy doesn't have a line. Or if he does have a line, it's so far that I would never even want to see where it was to cross it. Just, because that's the thing. Keep in mind, folks, you can say whatever you want to people, but there's got to be a line. If you have any morals, if you care about people, there are lines you just don't cross. And if this guy was willing to cross that line with Alexa Bliss on the heels of the death of Hannah Kamara, right? He's saying all these disparaging things about her. He's making sexual comments in relation to the disparaging things. Alexa Bliss has been very open about the fact that she's had eating disorders and she's had some other challenges that she is still actively working against. She's defeating these things, but she, it's a battle every day. So we have an idea about her mental state and what have you. And you're going to sit there and you're going to pile on that lady and say these just nasty, terrible things to her. Okay. So people who are hiding behind the veil of supporting Alexa Bliss, I guess they must have doxed this guy and they started sending terrible messages to his family members and saying things to them. Now, I'm sure this was some kind of eye for an eye justice sort of nonsense here, but can you imagine? Let's say it's my, crazy cousin over there who's saying something crazy. You're going to call me at all hours of the night and threaten me or say nasty things to me? What do I have to do with what he says? That's his problem. That's not my problem, right? So it's crazy because in this instance, the people who believe they're doing something positive, you have become that which you claim to be against. If you were sending nasty messages to this guy's family and to all these other folks, his loved ones, what have you, you're no better than he is, right? And if you want to go and tell him that he's wrong for what he said and he shouldn't have said, that's fine. That's completely above board. But you don't need to threaten, and you don't need to go on some tirade and carry on and all this other nonsense. You've become that which you claim to be against. That's important, man. We have to check ourselves, right? We have to constantly ask ourselves, is what I'm doing okay? Is this all right? And if you got to consult with somebody else in order to find the answer to that question, then by all means do that. But some of you mob mentality folks are just completely, I don't know what to say to you. And you're hiding behind sticking up for somebody else. That had nothing to do with Alexa Bliss. That had everything to do with you just wanting to be the bully for a change. And to the guy who said the things about Alexa Bliss, hey, I'm going to tell you right now, I hope you're very uncomfortable, my friend. Not even my friend. My fellow human. I hope you're very uncomfortable. And I hope you feel that to the core. Because you need to know that what you did was unacceptable. And you need to know that it can't happen again. And this guy's apologized, right? And I saw Alexa accepted his apology, and, kudos to her for doing that. I'm not sure that I would have accepted his apology so quickly, but hey, that's my cross to bear, I guess. But I got to tell you, folks, we're going in the wrong direction. It's okay to be fans. It's okay to call out people who who are against the people that you're rooting for and all that within the realm of pro wrestling. But there are lines you don't cross. It's like when I had Vince Russo on the show and he was talking about the folks who have threatened him, including Jim Cornette, by the way, who literally threatened to kill him over a wrestling show that he wrote because they didn't like that he wrote a wrestling show. You wouldn't say that to Vince McMahon's face, but you're gonna threaten Vince Russo that you're gonna kill him because he wrote a wrestling show that you didn't like. We are dealing with a global pandemic. We have innocent Americans, okay? Specifically black and brown folks who are literally being murdered by law enforcement out there. Senselessly. 3 people it's happened to in the past month, by the way. So much loss and so much ugliness in the world that we're being faced with, folks. These are real challenges that we got to endure and that our loved ones are enduring. Why on God's green earth would you take the time to add more challenges to somebody else's day? Be careful what you say to people, and make sure whatever you're saying to people, you'd be okay with it being plastered all over the world for everybody to see. Your mother, your father, your boss, God, whoever, right? And don't turn into the bully. That's the other part. Don't turn into that which you claim to be against. Don't turn into the monster. Continue to advocate against that stuff, man. Come on. I thought it was important to have a guy like Scoot Andrews on the show this week because when I think about an example of just a really, really good person, again, it's Scoot. Scoot comes to mind. When I talk to people who have listened to the show throughout its duration, I mean, Scoot Andrews is a name that pops up constantly as that was a really good guy, right? And I'm sure most of you listening right now, you are really good people. Allow that aspect of who you are to continue to be out front, especially for the world to see. Don't give in to the temptation to be the jerk online who's saying nasty things to people to upset them and what have you. Again, if it's a wrestling show and you want to talk trash to the heels, Roman Reigns is my arch nemesis, okay? He needs to get rid of the contract, Get out of this business. Get out of my life, right? That's a Ric Flair quote, by the way. That's all. I'm talking about the damn character, and I'm just talking nonsense, right? That's okay. If you got a problem with a wrestler, wrestling character, and you want to say this is the worst wrestler, and I don't like the way they do this, and why they're on TV, that's okay. But there's a line. Do not cross that line. And if you're unsure where the line is, like I said, partner up with some folks, find out. They'll help you. But as you can see by this guy who gave Alexa Bliss a hard time, if you do not want to be on the receiving end of that kind of stuff, and I don't think anyone should ever have to be, but if you don't want to be on the receiving end of that kind of stuff, don't treat anybody that way. That's right. That's right. Listen, I want to thank everybody for last week. You know, we had our 4-year anniversary, which is great. Boston Bad Boy took time out of his allegedly busy schedule to join us, and we were on video. So if anyone who listens to the show, if you just listen to audio, I encourage you, go to the YouTube channel, Duke Loves Rasslin. So that's youtube.com/Duke Loves Rasslin, Rasslin. Check out last week's episode. Okay? 4-year anniversary, Duke Loves Rasslin, 208. Check that out. You will get to see us with some crazy banter on video, and a bunch of folks who've been on the show through the years pop in, and they let you know after they've given me a hard time, which they all did. I don't know why. After they give me a hard time, they let you know how the show has affected their lives in a positive way and what have you, which is just so cool, right? I've told you from the beginning, the whole purpose of doing this show is to help people tell their stories and to add something positive to the pro wrestling community. That's the point here, right? So to connect with other fans and to connect with our favorites from yesterday, today, and even tomorrow. Share these experiences on the show. That's the point, man. It's good stuff. It's really good stuff. So, again, check us out on YouTube. You can see that video. Hit the subscribe button wherever you will listen or watch. Who knows? Maybe I'll do some more videos here. You know, I'm thinking about doing. Let me let you in on a little secret here. I'm thinking about doing a daily video series, right? Where I just talk about 1 or 2 topics and how they relate to each other. Be like a 3 to 5 minute clip, just something quick, you know. Who knows? Maybe I'll throw that out there. You folks let me know. Send me a message at Duke Loves Rasslin on Facebook, on Twitter, or email DukeLovesRasslin@gmail.com. Would you like to see a daily video from the Duke discussing a major topic in pro wrestling? Again, it'll be a quick take, right? But I'm thinking about it. Constantly pushing, constantly innovating. That's what we're here for. That's right. All right, well, I got to get out of here. Next week, I have a tremendous guest lined up. Literally, she is the most likely person, if beings from space, if extraterrestrials were to land on Earth right now, this doctor that I'm going to have on the show next week, she is the most likely person to have first contact and to actually interact with them. I'm serious. She's that brilliant. She's a major scientist. She's been on the show Mars, which is on the History Channel, which is a really innovative show where they talk about what would happen if we actually colonized Mars, of all things. Can you believe that? Well, Duke, what the heck would she be doing on a pro wrestling show? Well, humanoid, I guess you're going to have to listen next week and find out. But I will give you a hint. She does know a few wrestlers, and she has something to say about them. That's right. That's right. Okay, until next week, be kind to yourselves. Be kind to others. The voice of WCW, the voice of AEW, a person who, in my book, just may be the greatest commentator of all time, Take it away, Tony Schiavone.
Mr. Tony Schiavone, and we're desperately out of time on Duke Loves Rasslin.